to be a really fun panel. We have some fascinating people on stage, and what I'd like to do is have a wide-ranging conversation for 30 to 40 minutes about a number of topics, but loosely organized around the future of mobile. And then we're going to take audience questions for at least 20 minutes at the end, and maybe even a little longer. So if you have things that you'd like to ask the panelists, think about it now. I also noticed we have execs from, well, in the room or on stage, we have execs from Microsoft, Facebook, Google, some other companies. So maybe we can bring them into the conversation at some point as well. Maybe. Last night I saw Sheryl Sandberg, who's here, who's your president of Facebook. Is that right? COO. Yeah. She walked into the hotel we're all staying in with Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn, and I assume it was you have a pained look on your face. But this is I said that makes a post right there. Facebook and LinkedIn may be doing a merger, but anyway, apparently that's not happening. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. Starting from the end down here, Hamid Akhavan is the CEO of T-Mobile International. Professor Eric Clemons is the Professor of Operations and Information Management at the Wharton School. And I've been running to him all week and knocking heads, so I know he has some interesting things to say today. Chad Hurley, to my right, is the co-founder and CEO of YouTube, which is now a subsidiary of Google. That acquisition was at the end of 2006.
That's right.
My name is Mike Arrington. I write a blog called TechCrunch. I'm actually the least interesting person on stage, so I'll keep my talking to a minimum. To my left is Craig Mundie, the Chief Research and Strategy Officer at Microsoft. To his left is Shantanu Narayen, the President of Adobe. And Mark Zuckerberg's on this panel. We have the founder and CEO of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, on the far left, wearing a tie for the first time I've ever seen. Have you ever had a tie on before today?
Yeah.
Graduation?
All of 2009 and when I went to boarding school.
Okay. But I noticed you covered it up with the
No, I always wear the fleece.
So let's start off by
Have to
framing.
start off with important stuff.
Pardon me? Let's start off by framing the conversation. Sometime recently, about 1 billion people, we've reached the 1 billion people online mark, at least according to ComScore. And obviously that's a lot of people. But it pales in comparison to the number of people who have mobile phones of some sort in their hands. And I sort of talk a little bit about what the mobile landscape looks like today. So Hamid, can you tell us, obviously you probably know these numbers offhand, how many people have mobile phones today, what kinds of phones do they have, and what their capabilities are?
Yeah, mobile phones, clearly more than 3 billion people, about 3.2 or 3.3 billion people have mobile phones today. Number expanding very rapidly in a couple of years across the 4 billion mark. It's the most widely held electronic device of any kind. But a small portion of that, less than 5% or about 5% of that, are devices that are 100% browser ready and browser capable. So those are the ones we call super smartphones at the high end, which are optimum for internet experience. Nonetheless, without a small population of phones relative to the big base of phones, the traffic is rising, the mobile data traffic is rising, which says people are online. What you were saying, for instance, in Western Europe, where we have a good portion of these phones, we see a 4-fold increase in traffic every 12 months, at least, maybe more. So
in data traffic
is growing geometrically. And all of this is still what I call scratching the surface. We haven't gotten to the middle part of the S-curve yet. We're just at the very beginning. This part, the smartphone segment, is also growing very rapidly. But I think the proportion is going to be a smaller, about 10 or 15% of the total phones, even in the next 2 to 3 years.
What are the data rates that people, the average person, has in Europe, Asia, Africa, in different continents?
The mobile data networks are upgrading and becoming more capable on an ongoing basis. Every few months, we generally upgrade our networks to a higher speed. So the average rate changes, but a user in Europe can easily now have a 1 megabit per second on a sustained basis, which is something that even a few years ago was considered a very good broadband experience. Today we consider basic broadband experience, 1 megabit per second. On a small screen mobile phone, that is very useful because you're not displaying HDTV. You're having a QVGA screen, maybe a half VGA screen, but still pretty good rate.
Is there a secret code that will get you onto any T-Mobile Wi-Fi hotspot in the world? There probably is, right?
Yes, there is, and I will privately sell that after the show.
Mark, you have, this might be exaggerating, but I wrote a post recently saying that 1 in 5 Internet users are on Facebook today based on ComScore numbers showing you had 200 million uniques worldwide in, I think it was December.
It's about 1 in 10, yeah.
Yeah. Whatever that number is. How important is, that obviously doesn't take into account mobile. How important is mobile to you with your sort of nascent products that you offer today? How many people are logging on to Facebook via mobile devices today?
So mobile is obviously, it's really important because the whole point of what we're trying to do is make it so people can share more information with the people around them, right, and just surface more information that way. So in the past, people have uploaded large forms of content like a whole photo album or written a whole blog post, and increasingly people are taking a mobile photo, right, and uploading it right then, or constantly posting updates right from their phones. So it enables more sharing because people have the device with them all the time. So and right now we have around 25 million people who are actively using the mobile applications, and that's one of the areas that's growing the most quickly. And in a lot of the countries where Facebook is widely used, it's one of the most trafficked mobile websites. So it's already something that's pretty widely used. Small portion of Facebook users, but growing pretty rapidly. And and as the mobile platforms develop and become more standard, that's obviously going to be an area where we're going to focus a lot as well.
What is your biggest mobile platform? Is it the iPhone in terms of downloads, usage?
I actually don't know that off the top of my head. It's I think that there are a few that are really big. BlackBerry's really big. iPhone's really big. And then a lot of people just use mobile web and SMS.
Craig, from your perspective, whether as a representative of Microsoft or just being a super smart guy, where are we going with mobile and mobile social networking, and how important is the fact that these devices have presence location that can be transferred back to the network?
I think location-based services broadly are going to be a big factor. They haven't really matured very much because there haven't been that many devices that intrinsically have the capability, and sometimes where the knowledge is available through the carriers or the network operators, they don't generally make it available. But I think that'll change one way or the other over time, particularly as the devices become more intrinsically sort of GPS or GPS plus enabled. I think there will be a lot more integration of that into the applications than there has been today. It's a bit disjointed right now. But I think that will become a more and more important part.
Why aren't they integrated? Is it a technical issue, or is it privacy concerns about people's location being transmitted?
I think it's just you're too early in the cycle. There's no uniform way in which people get at those capabilities, even within the devices. Each platform has its own way that it surfaces some of these things, and I think as that becomes a bit more standardized, and there's just more of them out there, then I think you'll see the people who write the apps will naturally move to exploit it more, just like they do every other facility in the device. When there were very few cameras in the phones, not that many years ago, there wasn't that much photo integration into things. It was really hard to take a photo on your phone and get it out or move it anywhere. And now, you can click the photo and move it to an app, in a matter of a few button pushes. And I think it's just a natural process of evolution.
Professor Clemons, what do you think about all this?
First thing, this is fantastic. I always start by asking, what if there were no limits? And then I explore the future. And when I started writing about business process outsourcing in 1991, I stayed so far out ahead of the curve that I couldn't get anything published for 5 years. What I find interesting is the stuff that I was figuring is unimplementable due to the young men all around me is not so far out anymore. This is the only field that's evolved faster than futurists can write about it. It's just tremendous. I think one of the things, if you ask what if there were no limits, every human being with unlimited bandwidth walks into a bar and is instantly as smart as my dog. My dog would walk in and go, and think, oh, that dog likes me. Oh, but that dog came in with that dog, and he's real jealous. But I can take him. Oh, but that's his dad, and I can't take him. And oh, but I got two friends over there. The dog just, if you watch a dog walk into a room, he knows more than any of us. And
could you just connect the dots on that?
I'm going to.
Okay.
My good friend Jaron Lanier, who started a lot of the early work in virtual reality, said virtual reality is so last year. What you want is augmented reality. You want to walk into a room and see instantly who's on your side, who would be interesting, who you need to talk to, who's recently downloaded your stuff, whose stuff you've just stolen, and just sort of instantly understand the social setting, the context entirely around you. Now, what's interesting about that is my daughter does this better than I do. I'm probably the only guy on the faculty who published 3 papers last year with 19-year-old co-authors. And that's because if you really want to know what's happening, you ask the guys who use it. And if you want one more dot connected, and then I'll sit back, one of the things that's fascinating to me is the impact this has had on organizational structure. We've all watched World War II movies in which the beleaguered captain tells his corporal, get division on the phone, and the guy cranks, and he says, I need air cover, or I need artillery. And we all, thought the general was really a terrible old man, but he was the only guy who had access to data from everyone and the ability to command down. My freshmen can call a meeting faster than the dean. My freshmen have access to information faster than my university president. And we did surveys of different age groups. 25-year-olds still have some respect for their organization. 40-year-olds actually believe what the organization tells them. 18-year-olds have loyalty that they call basically, the cool word 5 years ago was posse. But it's fascinating to have Lehman and Goldman, well, not Lehman anymore, pick 2 survivor banks bidding on the same contract in direct opposition, and the CEOs do not realize that the teams doing the work are actually coordinating via Facebook because they're old college roommates. So the entire nature of the organization, the hierarchy, the nature of loyalty, the nature of organizational structure is changed as soon as I walk into the room and I instantly know everybody. Did that connect the dots okay?
Yeah, that was great.
All right for an old man?
It was all right. It was much better than yesterday.
Oh, good. Thank you. Give me 5 then.
Over Chattel. Okay. Here. You wanted it from Chad, not me.
Oh, you're an old man, too.
Okay, well, that's the last time I'm going to call on you. Shantanu, Adobe, Flash, what's the future? When am I going to be able to run it on my iPhone or whatever device I'm testing that week? It's obviously, Flash in particular has made tremendous inroads on the desktop machines, but you just don't see it online for different reasons. Flash video doesn't run well on ARM chips, which run a lot of the mobile devices. Maybe it's not a focus for you guys. Where do you see this going? Because you think about virtual worlds and social networking, Flash could play a big part in that.
Well, at Adobe, we certainly believe that the whole multi-screen experience for applications is going to be absolutely critical, whether they be social networking applications or whether they be video applications. And we're actually really focused on making sure that Flash works exactly the same on all those devices. We've shipped only 1 billion devices that have Flash on them. In Japan, virtually no phone can you get today that doesn't have Flash, and everything there, whether it's 3G video or all the other services through Docomo work. And we're clearly seeing that we still have tremendous fragmentation as it relates to mobile devices, but I think the industry will step up and we will solve that problem. We're working on Android, we're working on Windows Mobile, it actually ships with them, and Symbian. So it's very much part of our strategy to be able to author once and to be able to play back with the fidelity that you expect across all of these devices.
Can I ask the audience, if you have a smartphone, if you have a smartphone, could you raise your hand? Just a phone, yeah. Okay, so everyone. If you are on a Microsoft-driven device, raise your hand. Okay, if you're on a Symbian operating system, iPhone. Wow, that's a very Silicon Valley answer. What's the one that you guys have? Android. Android? Front row. Is there anything else? Oh, BlackBerry. Anybody have a BlackBerry?
Hey.
Oh, that one. That's a very law firm answer.
Ergo fragmentation, right?
Chad, I remember you came to a party at my house a couple of months after you launched YouTube, and I remember asking you, I'm so envious. I remember asking you, so this YouTube thing, like video, people are putting like videos of like fire trucks and stuff up, and a lot of copyrighted content at the time. I said, "What do you think it's going to work out?" And I remember you saying, "I don't know. We'll see where it goes." So I guess first of all, how did that work out?
Well, we're still working on it. We still feel there's a long way to go because what you said, a billion people online now.
Yeah.
We have about a third of them. So we need another 2/3 to come to our site. But specific to the mobile market, I think it's we're here in Davos, and there's a lot of doom and gloom, and I think within the technology sector, there's a lot of upside, and in particular in the mobile market, mobile services, mobile applications. And what we've been seeing, just by serving videos on some of the limited devices that now can handle video, from the iPhone to the G1, that it's actually on a percentage basis growing faster than our site itself, that more people are consuming videos at a faster rate on their cell phones. And I think that will only increase as the devices and the connectivity increases.
Far more interesting for me than watching video on my device, which, it's a great way to pass the time, and YouTube is on the iPhone, but is uploading video to YouTube directly from a device. And we're starting to see some of the applications come out. When will we see that really become common, where I'll be recording video and uploading it to YouTube all day, all the time?
Yeah, well, it's available on some devices, and most of those devices you still have to connect to your computer to actually upload the file. We do have limited mobile uploading capability, but the file sizes are limited, and the videos don't look that great because the cameras aren't very good. But again, as the devices improve and as the connections increase, it'll become a larger part of what we're all about. Because you're mentioning the type of videos that we do get, there's going to be many more people on the street with a cell phone, with a digital camera, than there are going to be professional networks or studios with cameras developing their own content. People are going to be sharing their own experiences, their own thoughts and ideas, and they're going to be being able to do it instantly. So a bright future in terms of uploads to YouTube.
How much content is uploaded to YouTube now? You guys usually talk about per minute.
Per minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, so currently we receive over 15 hours of video content every minute on our site. And it continues to increase, and we've also recently increased the file size, the resolution which we're displaying videos. So we have HD 720 display, and so the market is here in terms of people taking HD video. We feel we have the largest library of HD video on the internet at this point, in terms of catalog size, and not only the HD video content increasing, the views increasing. Just participation in terms of what people are finding, in terms of what they're looking for. They are looking for higher quality content. We always tried to design a service that was easy to use. We'd reduce the quality of the video so it would stream seamlessly. Yeah. But we're seeing some people either have the patience or they have the connections to be able to consume this at the quality it should be.
What percentage of that 15 hours is copyright violating?
It's a small percentage. Because, like I mentioned before, the majority of the people within our system have the tools, the cameras, and the capabilities to take their own videos. But really, for us, it's a non-issue. We've developed the technologies, the content ID systems, for content owners to give them maximum choice on how they want to use content within our system. And what we're finding is the majority of the content owners are leaving their content on the site to monetize it. Over 90% of the partners or people using our tools are leaving content on YouTube.
Craig, how important is mobile to Microsoft?
It's super important. Our view going forward is we kind of think of the three-screen strategy. There's the really big screen that's sort of entertainment focused, like television. There's the traditional computer-sized screen, desktop, laptop, and there's the little screen, which is your phone. And our view is that what people need next is to have some rational relationship among the three screens, some more easy-to-use way of coordinating what they do across them. And so even though our bread and butter was originally in the desktop, we've pushed upward into the television and the gaming experience at one end, and we've been in the mobile phone software business for quite some time, and I'd say it's one of the strategic imperatives for the company.
What do you think of Professor Clemons' idea of, I guess we'll call it the dog sniffing future, where you can walk into a room and get all kinds of metadata about the people and things going on in there with your mobile device? How far away are we from something like that?
Well, I think that will continue, and I agree with him that over time, more and more augmentation of the things that you want to know will be there. many people said, they just can't wait for something that will, recognize faces and remind them who those people are that they know they've seen. They just can't remember their name. And the real question is, how do you interface the computer to the person in a way that's socially acceptable? Yeah. Even that is interesting to speculate on. If you would have asked most people, if you just arrived from outer space a few years ago and said, hey, how often would you see people wandering around with this silver thing hanging on their ear? They would have said, that'd be pretty weird. But, Bluetooth devices, they become more and more commonplace and accepted. So, whether the thing turns out to be eyeglasses, that turn out to have retinal projectors in them or something. I mean, it's hard to know how you're going to get the data.
Do you guys have that kind of stuff in Microsoft, like in the labs?
Yeah.
Retinal projectors? And
we have all those things.
Do you have one on right now?
I don't. But I wish I did.
That is, of course, the way you would do it. You wouldn't need face recognition. Your phone would know from my phone that you'd met me before, and you would...
but what Craig is talking about is how it gets that information into your brain.
Well,
he doesn't want to bother looking at a screen.
That's why the eyeglasses come in.
Well, I don't know. Maybe you just have the direct implant. I mean, we had a meeting with the MIT people yesterday who were talking about this going the other way, where they now actually can put a small implant in to help people who've lost limbs control prosthetic arms and things. And, it turns out it isn't that hard to actually think that it goes the other way. Yeah. So, you just have to decide at what level you think the man-machine interface evolves to. But there's certainly no technological reason now to believe, even in my lifetime, that type of direct communication between the devices that you have on your person won't ultimately be in your person. And then the division is harder to find.
All right. Do we have any questions from the audience? Nothing? Privacy? You want to talk about? Yeah, I think privacy is a good topic to talk about.
Let's talk about that.
I tried to drag you guys into that, but both Craig and Mark, you didn't go there. So I'll be more direct about it. It is my opinion that privacy plays a big role in limiting and slowing down the rollout of mobile services. I have heard off-record, not from you, Mark, but off-record people at Facebook and at MySpace talk about concerns with attorneys general in the United States. There have been so many issues with social networking in general that have involved the attorneys general with privacy that the last thing the big social networks want is to have them come after them again because of location information flowing to other users and things like that. That has to be, I mean, you sort of didn't answer that question, but that has to be an issue that you guys think about, just policy-wise, when you think about mobile social networking.
So there are definitely a lot of really interesting services that can be new, right, in this environment. So I talked about a couple, right, just being able to post a photo from your phone, post updates about what you're doing now, like status updates and things like that. And that's revealing and sharing types of information that people didn't even think about sharing 5 years ago, right? It's just what I'm doing right now, what's going on. So it's not that far of a stretch from that to get to I want to share with the people around me what my location is, right, or be able to identify who the people are around me. But privacy is a really important part in that. And it's always been a really core part of what Facebook does, because giving people the controls so that they can say, I want to share this piece of information with these people is what makes it so that people feel comfortable doing it, right? So even from the beginning of Facebook, we made it so that you weren't sharing your profile with everyone on the site, even when it was only at a few colleges. You're sharing it with your friends and the people around you at your college if you wanted. Right now, there are more than 150 million people on the site, but you're sharing your information with maybe the few hundred or 100 that you're friends with. And if you want to share, say, your cell phone number with an even smaller number, then you could do that. And that's what makes it so people are comfortable sharing. No one wants to share their phone number.
But you don't let people share their location yet. And we know that that's possible because there are services like Looped and I think Brightkite and probably a dozen others that are mobile social networks that sort of focus on where you're located and then the people around you and what they're doing.
I think that's actually because of some of the other issues that we've been talking about, which are that the platforms haven't been standardized yet, right? So, I mean, a company like Facebook is still a relatively small company, right? And we're working on a lot of different things. And, with all the different mobile platforms, right, iPhone, BlackBerry, Android, mobile web, just all the new ones that are coming out, it would be very difficult at this scale to be developing applications for all these different services and platforms. So, I mean, one of the big things that we're looking forward to, and that I think is going to spur massive innovation across the whole industry, is when the number of platforms consolidates and when you know that you can develop things for maybe 1 or 2 platforms and reach all of the different phones. Right? That's going to be a really powerful thing. But I think that and the fact that GPS isn't really available on all phones are the things that make it so that that's not available. I think that the privacy issues, that actually ends up being pretty simple. You give people complete control over how they share their information, right? And when you do that, people kind of can, over time, get comfortable sharing what they want to. And if you don't, then no one will use it.
Yeah, I'd like to add a few thoughts. 7 or 8 years ago, well before these became popular questions related to the online services or the search businesses, we realized that this whole question of trust was going to be essential to people's continued uptake. And so we created a thing called the Trustworthy Computing Initiative at Microsoft, which focused both on security and privacy and a number of other things. The thing that we ultimately determined, to answer the lady's question directly, is, and Mark alluded to it too, is that what people need is notice and choice. And it's pretty much universally true that if you give people notice of what you're collecting and you give them some choice as to what the disposition of that data or uses are, then there really are virtually no privacy issues that emerge. And so that concept has guided a lot of what Microsoft has done. While most people today, I'd say, are focused a little bit too much on the data and the idea that data collection and data retention is sort of intrinsically bad. I'll give you the counterexample. We have Health Vault, which is a place now where people put as a private repository of their health data. And it turns out you don't want us to get rid of it every 90 days. All right? In fact, you want people to have a permanent repository of health data and in very controlled ways allow it to participate in the research for cures for diseases and other things. And ultimately you may even want to be told that when something new is known, that you'd like to be informed as it relates to your personal medical condition. So I think it's going to be important that we evolve this discussion, beyond the question of what got collected. Was it location data? Was it medical data? Was it, behavioral targeting, the data for advertising? And understand that the technology is going to result in us collecting and remembering a huge amount of data. And over time, we ultimately find beneficial ways. People can certainly speculate that there are evil ways, to use and exploit data. And the question, I think, is going to become one of how can we find a manageable way for people to declare their intent about each class of data and each class of service that they subscribe to. And to the extent that we can get that agreed on, and that becomes platformized so that you're not facing 100 different ways to express that intent, then I think that these issues will come under control. There are definite business tensions because it's easy to build certain business models that presume that you have almost a surreptitious collection of information. And of course governments, their intelligence businesses, that's what they do for a living. So at some level, you have to realize that the world is going to be a sea of data, and the real question related to privacy is, how does the user get to specify, what they think their ownership rights are in that data, no matter who collected it. And I think these are questions that are not clear in the law and not clear in policy, and that's really got to be the focus of a lot of the discussion.
But I think it would be dangerous, actually, if we allowed a lot of regulation to dictate what happens over the internet as it relates to this, because I think the rise of social networks have proven that the desire to be part of a community, trumps in many cases a concern that people have about their privacy or data. And so I think they're going to force every one of these companies to self-police as well, in addition to the laws that will emerge.
But I think that this privacy issue actually is a very paramount issue in terms of future services. I like to position it as probably one of the most difficult issues we are facing today in terms of developing new services. Yes, there's a lot of data, but there's not only legal but also ethical rules that we have to follow. Location-based service is a good example. There's probably an infinite level of permission rights that you could design at going from as easy as whoever is in any neighborhood will get an offer from the local restaurant without having any information about who is there, all the way down to having your friends and family in the vicinity have a little icon come on their address book saying that you are within 50 meters of them, but they don't want to meet with you. So, and there's a whole host in between. The problem is that today there is no way that forward in terms of defining these levels, and no way to define, to talk to the customers and the consumers and get their permissions in a legal way and ethical way. So we actually see that as a very huge issue which we're grappling with. Can I build on that and first commend you on that? I don't think it's correct to say we don't need regulation. What we really don't need is the wrong regulation. I would be very reluctant to use some of the social networks I'm comfortable with if I thought my colleagues had access to what I was doing. Not to put too fine a point on it, I have family members who I would never want to know I was within 50 miles or 50 feet because I am not going to look them up, and why fight over it? And so I think what you're actually saying is correct. You need the platform that will enable me to decide what I want, and you need the regulators to say if the user has given informed consent, then there are no privacy issues. But if the user has given restrictions, as Mark is suggesting, and those restrictions have been violated. I mean, the example you were using, I happen to want my health records online, but that's because I'm lucky enough not to have any health conditions that I would really not want my employer or my wife to know about. But if I had some remarkably socially rude conditions, I would never want that information to leak. So the idea of regulation, the technology platform, and user choice is the magic combination.
I don't think Mark would put it this way, but one thing I like about Facebook is that it's always been ready, fire, aim. And if you look at the news feed, you guys have always pushed the envelope with new products, and almost every time you launch something, you have an uprising on Facebook over the product, which usually dies down a couple of days later. And Newsfeed is the one that I think is fascinating, because when did you launch that? At the end of 06?
It was, I think, September 06.
Yeah. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, what Newsfeed is basically anything you do on Facebook goes into a stream of news about you, and your friends can see it depending on your privacy settings. And people just went crazy over it, some people to start. But now, not only do people accept it, but I think that they really like it. And I think the service has been duplicated by most of the social networks. So one of the things you've told me in the past, Mark, is that you're surprised at how fast culture is evolving towards people not only being willing to give up more private information in exchange for utility, but like actively looking to do that.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that I was saying just a moment ago when I was saying that I thought that location-based services weren't that big of a stretch from some of the status activity that was happening on the site. You can go back to the beginning of Facebook, where people basically just put up a very small amount of information about themselves, their name, the community they were a part of, some interests, one photo, that was it, right? And then over time, people started sharing more things, right? All the groups that they were a part of, all photo albums, lots of different stuff like that. And now it's getting into really real-time stuff, right? Like constant messaging, right? Constant status updates. And I think
also
that
things you do on third-party sites.
Yes, I mean, that was the whole point of the platform, right?
Inauguration,
Making it so that people can share all different types of information, whether inside or outside of Facebook. And I think what's happening is people are just getting comfortable sharing more and more, not just because the main reason for that is that it's valuable, right? When you put up a photo album, a lot of the reasons why you've taken photos is that you can share them with people, right? I mean, you were there, you know what happened, right? So all the stuff, I mean, people, by sharing, where you are at a time, for example, you might make it so that you can meet up with people who are around you, right? Or get advice on what you might want to do in a place, right? I mean, sometimes when I travel to New York, for example, I went there right before I came here, said I was in New York, I got like all these messages with things that were going on. I didn't realize it was one of my friend's birthdays that night, and he's like, "Oh, it's my birthday. You should come to my party," right? So it actually is very useful to share this type of information. It creates a lot of efficiency within society. So I think that's one of the things that's always been a core principle of Facebook, is that the world, we want to push people to be able to share more and more information, because we think that quickly people are going to evolve to use these new technologies to want to do that. So that's why we did things like Newsfeed, which now, as you mentioned, a lot of other companies have replicated. Why we did things like Platform, and why I think some of this mobile stuff is going to be really important.
We had a question back here.
I just wanted to think around the panel, I'm Christine DC, sorry. Think around the panel, can you quantify with mobile the demographics of who's using what and who isn't using the mobile content at all, and particularly in terms of age groups? And then related to that, if there are any new applications or any particular things which are managing to get the older, perhaps less frequent mobile content users engaged.
I can clearly start the answer. I'm sure everybody can chime in. Clearly, the younger segment in the population, anywhere from 15-year to 30-year-old range, has the highest usage of mobile data and social networking services, and the ones who are showing the most affinity towards new innovation, new data services. I want to use this opportunity to also say something regarding sharing and social networking using mobile and privacy, which we were just wrapping up. I actually see that the world is dividing in two categories of people: the ones who are becoming more open and publishing themselves, like people on Facebook and others who actually YouTube, and they like to publish themselves. They're putting everything out there, and there is a large group of people, and I don't want to say it's the great majority, but clearly a large group of people who are going exactly the other way, who are trying to protect themselves against all of this bombarded information that is coming to them that is unsolicited, and they're just actually not enjoying it and actually becoming a bit more afraid of losing privacy without having given the consent. So this is the group that is a challenge for all of us in order to offer new services to without making them nervous about their privacy and impacting their lifestyle. But clearly, as the age goes up, you could see that the affinity towards new services, social networking, mobile data, and innovation goes down. That's clear. And the sweet spot, 15 to 30, 35-year-old, is the sweet spot.
You actually hit something absolutely central. There's a huge difference between push and pull. If someone pushes an ad at me or a product recommendation or a restaurant, and I can't even use my phone for what I want because I'm getting bombarded, that's the wrong model. If anything I want, if I want to know where my friends eat when they're in Chicago, and I pull that in, that's enormously useful. So it's not that us old guys are hiding from data, we're hiding from push. Now that's fine for any one of us who's not in the advertising business. But if you're a media seller, a media buyer, or you are the head creative of an advertising agency, you've got an interesting problem.
I'll add one other thing. I think there actually is another, from an application point of view, demographic group, which is people whose first real use of these smarter phones was for email. I mean, we'll do a poll in the audience. Okay, how many people in the audience do email on their smartphone? 100%. Of the people who raised their hand, how many people used some other application on their phone before they used email on their phone?
Does text messaging count?
No, not counting text. I'm saying when you got up to the smartphone category, you weren't just voice and SMS. What was the first app? I would say, almost everybody, you'll find their first app was mail. So I think that there's the people who started using these more advanced things first, with the BlackBerry and Windows Mobile and other things, all the focus in those things was essentially integration into the email systems. And then that essentially moved into the public email systems. And, and I think that these two worlds are sort of converging. You're starting with people who are young, they see a diverse set of applications that they can do on these things, they integrate them into these other environments, and they're growing up that way. I think you'd see that there's a very, very large community of people who didn't really depend on the general internet access. The first thing that was important to them was the email access. And these two worlds are sort of coming at each other now.
Also, what the definition of a phone is. So you're seeing some notebooks being sold with 3G access, and are they a mobile phone, and where's the line exactly drawn?
Yeah, but if you actually look at the ones that have 3G access and ask how many people make phone calls on that thing, I think you'll find today that that's still pretty small.
Yeah, you'd have to have a soft phone.
Because all they really were after was mobile data access.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that many of us want the phone connectivity on our phone. I mean, as long as there's enough data, we could do anything. We could make phone calls on it over, just VoIP calls. So
you can. I actually I personally believe that almost anybody who's going to use one of these higher order connected mobile devices also will have a phone. I think it's extremely rare that you find, people who are going to spend the money for that and don't also have a phone. So this idea of basic, very personal, always on your person type of communication, whether it's text, voice, email, or some amalgam of those things, I think will continue to be a very important basic application. And then, you'll say, how do I get mobile data into the rest of the mobile platform?
Yeah. And one other segment that I think is important is that there are a lot of countries where the internet was kind of skipped over in terms of how it evolved, right? I mean, in the U.S., a lot of people were using the web before they started using mobile phones for all these different types of applications. But in a lot of other countries, web use was not a common thing, and people just immediately got phones and started using phones. So I mean, at Facebook, a big goal for us is to standardize everyone on being able to communicate on one platform, right? And in order to do that, we need to make sure that we're building applications that people can use even in those places. And indeed, we have a lot of people who only use Facebook on their phone, right? Or the primary place or the primary way that they're using Facebook is on their phone. I mean, a lot of people in, say, like the Middle East, for example, don't have computers and walk 2 miles to a cyber cafe to go use Facebook and check it out, but can also use it on their phones, and it's a lot more convenient. So I mean, I think that's a really important demographic and one, or at least segment of the population. It's really important not to overlook, because in some of those places, the web will just probably not completely evolve to the level that it is in other places, just because it's not as necessary, because people are going straight to phones.
Yeah. And
Mark, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and I was just going to mention, back to your comment about push versus pull, and people, in a way, maybe resisting push. I think maybe things skew to the younger demographic, especially for mobile, because they're active versus passive. I think you mentioned 2 different audiences, and that's what
I'm active.
Yeah, well, that's what I even see on our site at YouTube. You have a small percentage of the community actually contributing, uploading video, but the majority of the community actually consumes and watches video. I think what some of these mobile...
What is the percentage? What percentage of the total users have uploaded video?
It's in a range of 2-3%.
Okay.
It's very low. Yeah, I mean, but audience is so large, even that small percentage is a big number. But I think what some of these mobile technologies can enable is more passive, active participation, if you will. Things that you can opt into instead of not updating your status message, but going back to the dog sense, where it instantly tells the world where you are.
Can I try something slightly different? Michael Arrington was doing this yesterday. It's completely orthogonal, and it's the idea that a community affects what you buy. It's the idea of, I don't really care what a professional actor says about a product, but I do care what my Facebook friends say. I do care what my TripAdvisor friends say. How does social affect consumption? How does it affect brand equity? How does it affect consumer welfare by actually letting me get whatever I want? How does it affect corporate strategy by saying advertising is no longer a barrier to entry?
Well, there's a grand experiment going on at Facebook right now,
Right.
where my friends are pitching me all kinds of crap all day. Every time I log in, I see social ads with, I mean, it's crazy, the stuff. How's that going, Mark?
That's what I was about to say. So,
But
so
that's
the
the
basis
push
of our
side.
ad products, right? Is that rather than taking just a large message and pushing it at you, what we do is we can have some content and then make it so that your friends and the people around you can comment on it or say how they relate to it. And what we find is that pieces of content that have something that's contributed by your friends have much higher performance and rates of
Absolutely
engagement.
right.
And I mean it's intuitive, right? But it goes to exactly what you're saying.
That's what I thought the Microsoft Facebook link up would be. I thought it would be social search. I thought it would be, tell me what you think of it. Don't push it at me. That's advertising, and I don't want that. There are beers. My students are so tired of, but the beer guys are so passionate. There are beers that now cost $360 a case, and there's only one dealer in the Philadelphia area who sells them. and he linked himself up to the largest beer rating service online. You can click on his website, say what's new, click and get immediately taken to peer content, community content reviewing sites. And he went from 95% of his business within a few miles of his store to 1/3 out of state, which is striking because in Pennsylvania, out-of-state purchases are illegal. So, I mean...
He has a new problem.
Well, he does, but no one knows, and I won't use his name. But what is...
I bet we could find it in about 10 seconds.
What is fascinating...
Beer, $360
Please. What is fascinating is nobody drives up from Virginia or down from Maine to buy Coors at $14 a case. His average out-of-state purchase is in excess of $500, and it doesn't take any more space for a $500 or a $200 case of beer than a $14 case of beer. It's no heavier to lift it, and the margins, if you're the only guy who sells it, the margins are fantastic. He would argue that he is in the business of providing social welfare. We're all happier if we can get the beer we want, but he couldn't do it without the social network guys. Is this a one-off, or does this transform product development, and does it transform consumption?
So, Eric, the one thing I noticed was you keep talking about your dog and your friend. You remember that old ad that used to first come out on the internet? Nobody knew you were a dog. So, are we sure we're talking about a friend as opposed to
Yeah, there was also a commercial about a dog drinking water, and I think the tagline was, "Alex, you better be drinking your water." So I guess it's remotely possible that my dog could be drinking my beer, but I hope not.
I'm gonna take control of this.
Thank you.
Well, we had a question right here. Yep.
Hi, I'm Bill Loris from the International Development Law Organization. One of the things that we've come to understand is that we're trying to promote rule of law in developing countries. We were reaching 10, 15,000 people a year, and there are a lot more people to reach on this issue. So we have set up a strategic objective to network. That's what it's called. Being older and all lawyers, we actually don't know how to do it, but we know we're going to try to do it. But the concern that strikes us first is limitations, like Mark was talking about. And what is happening in countries which don't have that kind of bandwidth and speed and communication capabilities? And are you working on specific things that will allow you to penetrate these kinds of technologies and learning bases and social networking out to those areas?
Well, I guess I can go ahead.
Well, I mean, you can comment too. You know, our view is that in the countries today that are, you say, emerging from an economic point of view, the cell phone will be people's first computer. And, you know, they won't call it a computer necessarily, but, you know, it's gotten smart enough, hey, it really is. And so the cell phone networks, which will have ubiquitous reach and will bring at least some limited data transmission capability, will be the very first way in which people will start to get access. The thing that now that that's been going on long enough, we start to see some trends that say once people start to have the little computer, then they say there's a bunch of things they want to do and they want a bigger computer. And whether they go to internet cafes to get it or they ultimately buy them, or as the price comes down, more and more people do that. It creates local pressure for better connectivity. And I think that, you know, we're going to back into that both through the wireless capabilities and gradually through the other novel communications technologies and more traditional wireline connectivity. But certainly, if your goal is reach on a global basis, simple services on small screens is basically the way to go.
And just to add to that, you know, what is very common today in the world is the second generation networks, the digital networks. Most of the developing world actually is on that generation because they skipped the first generation. They were not developed enough to start with the old technology. They started with the second generation. In fact, the latest part of the second generation technology is very prevalent around the world. That has been upgraded, for by most part, through software and other hardware upgrades, and a couple of hundred kilobits per second is pretty much now the most common data rate available around the world. And so I would consider 200 kilobits per second as the lowest common denominator today. And for smaller screens, if you're not doing HD video, obviously, this should be plenty enough to conduct your normal daily business. Yes, it's not the same experience as having a 16 megabits per second, laptop in front of you. But if the applications are designed properly, and more applications are being designed access aware, and so they know what kind of access you're using, and they limit themselves and so forth, I think it's very useful. So the experience can be quite amazing.
I find it amazing when carriers say, I don't mean this to be offensive, but when carriers say that there's this much bandwidth, 200 kilobits, whatever, and that should be enough to do. If it was exponentially higher, applications would emerge that leverage that and use that. And if you build the highway, people are going to build on it. And so I wish the carriers didn't have this stranglehold to say that 200K is plenty for us.
I'd like to comment on that. I got to comment on this. In 2001, in Europe, which was where the 3G started coming out, in 2001, we talked about 30 kilobits per second. Today in Europe, we're offering 14 megabits per second. 7 years, that's 250 times higher bandwidth. I don't even know if the original internet grew that fast, when the broadband was coming in. So when we're talking about 200 kilobits, I was talking about this is the lowest common denominator available. But today in Europe, multi-megabits per second is available almost everywhere. U.S. the same way, in most of the cities in the U.S.
Not where I live.
I think when the lawyer says, I don't know how to do it, he doesn't mean kilobit. I started, by the way, just to let you know what the lowest common denominator is, I started at 110 baud. Think of it as roughly 110 bits per second, and I was the envy of all my friends because I was online and they weren't. I think the lawyer is asking a very different sort of question. It's a group called Architecture for Humanity that is actually currently building social networks in Myanmar without the government's...
Was this what you said in the note?
Yes,
okay.
But since my handwriting is...
It just was like...
I know, but if you want to talk about how to do it, the idea of building unauthorized social networks in Myanmar is absolutely fantastic. I don't want to call on the guy without permission, but if he would like to comment on that from the audience...
Let's call on him. Who is it?
He knows who he is. He's just waved.
Wait, okay.
You want a microphone? You want to borrow mine? Just...
Can you summarize in 15 seconds everything that you're working on? And why it's important to humanity?
So only a tech guy would ask that question. What we were doing was using Twitter and Facebook to get in and do reconstruction in Myanmar. And we were in way before anyone else. And using a network within Myanmar to allow Burmese architects to do the reconstruction
without permission.
Without permission.
Did you say Yammer? Twitter?
Myanmar.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Using Twitter and Facebook. And we raised all the money from Facebook, and then we used Twitter and SMS messaging within the country. So it's not about bandwidth, it's about penetration.
Okay. Do we have any more questions? There was one. Yeah. Just trying to roughly go in the order that they were asking. We're down to about 5 minutes. So.
Thank you. Quick question. We have here the top 5 digital media companies in the world. My question is, in your view, guys, what is the future of the media, and when finally the online advertising income is going to be bigger than television?
Well, I can start first in terms of what we hear all of our media companies want to do. I mean, they clearly want access to their content on all devices. And I think first step that they're all doing is saying, how can we take the brand that we have and make sure that it works, not just on PCs, but increasingly on handheld devices. And in the living room, though using internet. For those of you who weren't at CES, there were some pretty incredible announcements about TVs that are now going to have broadband in it. And I think that's also a very exciting development in terms of what happens. Having said that, I think all of them would tell you that the monetization models, as it relates to both monetization on the internet as well as monetization on mobile, is in its infancy. And so I think they're trying to figure out whether it's going to be a subscription-based model or whether it's going to be a model that's monetized through advertising.
If you look at YouTube, and you might want to have something to say on this as well, but it's like they're just throwing everything at the user just to see what sticks. So you load a video, and there's. Have you tried pre-rolls yet? You've got bubbles popping up and ads across the side, and this and that, and you redirect, and
you have to experiment.
Yeah, but you're trying everything at once. It's like you throw 8 different ad units at it.
Life is short. So in terms of talking about the media world, specifically TV, we're going to quickly move into an on-demand delivery in terms of content delivery.
Well, we've seen that with Hulu.
Yeah, and it's going to accelerate as the TVs have the connectivity to the content. So the linear broadcast model, I think, is going to break down very, very soon. I mean, a lot sooner than people realize. The second thing about advertising specifically, I think the market for online video is reaching critical mass. That some of these audiences are similar in size to what you can reach on television programming, and that what online video represents is a more measurable opportunity. It's an opportunity that's accountable, and that I think within a world like we're living today, where you have an economic crisis, people are making smarter decisions about how they're spending their money, that they're going to move it from something that isn't as measurable, and they're going to move it to a world and get in front of an audience of the same size for a fraction of the cost.
So the measurement argument is a good one. You've been saying this for a couple of years now. But wait, let me just ask one question. You've, as you said, you're trying all these different ad units. Just your gut. What's the one that's going to work for online video?
Well, it's going to be a combination because YouTube isn't one-dimensional. We're not just about viewing videos. I mean, if you just break down our search, we're like the second or third largest search engine on the web. And that combined just with homepage traffic. So it's going to be a combination of digital and kind of traditional kind of broadcast opportunities, commercials, pre-rolls. But what we're seeing is that great opportunity of combining what Google's been able to do very successfully is to promote links, websites, in a very relevant way to individuals. So we're introducing some of those concepts where an individual can promote a video through a similar process and gain visibility, gain views, and gain reach on our site.
Okay.
I'd just like to say one thing. At a conceptual level, I agree with both of those comments. I actually think pragmatically it's going to be a longer time for the switch. And the only reason is we talk about broadband rates and penetration. But the reality is the aggregate capacity to deliver streaming video at high levels is not really that good. I mean, you can do modest amounts at fairly considerable expense, for single specialty events. But the idea that we're going to turn off cable and turn off satellite delivery and have most people get on-demand video is not in the cards, in my opinion, technically anytime soon.
What's anytime soon? 10 years?
10 years.
Yeah.
There's another constraint, and I'm almost thinking the advertising question. Advertising is to truly free selection of broadband content what improved rotary handsets, rotary phones are to wireless communication. They're completely different worlds. We will monetize the internet. We will, but we will not monetize the internet with push-based advertising of any kind. I believe that. Nobody else agrees with me.
Yeah, nobody. I mean,
I know.
Yeah, I mean, look. I mean,
Well, he's finding out what works because life is short, and you got to try everything.
Has anybody in the audience yet figured out who the beer vendor is? The search. I assume somebody would throw that at us. I think are we out of time? We're done. We have 5 more minutes. So let's take one more question. Who has a really good question? An exciting question. A question that's going to wake the audience up. It better be good. You say, yep. Okay, the heat's on.
Cool thing. My question is related to Facebook and YouTube. Can you give us one good reason why you'll still be around in 5 years' time?
So the question is directed to Facebook and YouTube, to Mark and Chad. And will you be around in 5 years' time? Yeah. Well, and in what form will you be?
Yeah. I'll just start off. I just think what YouTube and Facebook represent to some extent is empowering people with the ability to communicate. And you mentioned the different types of content that we have on our site. It's much more than that. We've seen people expressing their thoughts, sharing experiences. We have the Queen on the site. We have the Pope on the site. We have the White House on our site. It's becoming a new way for people to communicate through a democratized video platform. And that's why I think we're going to be around in 5 years.
What are the chances that you'll be there in 5 years?
Myself?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. And life is short.
My guess is 0.
0?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll see.
We'll bet. All right.
Well, so we've been here for 5 years about already, and I mean I think that the main trend that that Chad was talking about, I think, is the dominant one, which is that more and more people are getting access to be able to share information, get access to the information that other people are sharing. And that'll just continue, right? So the real question for us is what types of information do people want to share, and where exactly do they want to share it with, and who do they want to share it with? And I think there's a really compelling case. People are always going to want to share and communicate with their friends and the people around them. They're also going to want to communicate more broadly. They're going to want to use different applications. I mean, today, some of the things that I've discussed are that early on, people wanted to share kind of interests and really basic information about them. They still do that, but now they do other things. So they share lots of photos, right? And even how they've shared photos is changing, going from mostly web, it's still vast majority web, but it's increasingly mobile as well. Videos, just all this other types of content. And that's really the reason why we built the platform that we've built, right? So first what we did was we made it so that any developer, right? We have over 400,000 developers now across the world, are building different applications for Facebook. And those applications each represent a unique way that someone can share information. Right, so whether it's a game or they want to share information about the music that they like, we don't provide any music applications. That's one that's been built in the ecosystem. One about some of the other biggest apps, or there's one about philanthropic causes that people either want to raise awareness for or raise money for, and there are just thousands of other applications. And increasingly, it's moving from just being people building applications inside Facebook to this new program that we've launched called Facebook Connect, which is kind of the next evolution of platform, which makes it so that people can now build all the same kinds of applications that they could build inside Facebook on the rest of the web and in other devices, with access to make it so that people can know who their friends are and bring all their information with them to other sites and can share information back with their friends on Facebook. So I think the form that Facebook will exist in is one where there are a lot of different applications which represent the unique ways that people are sharing information, and those will change over time. But Facebook will always kind of be this hub where people, where we've mapped out who people know and where people are going to share information. So I think that's just going to be a trend that continues for a while. I mean, we grew in the last year from 50 million people to 150 million people, growing really quickly. I mean, it's...
Mark, are you aware of, you must in the back of your mind know that, first there was Friendster, who had their lunch eaten by MySpace, and you guys came along and have grown quite a bit bigger than MySpace worldwide now. Somebody's going to do that to you, and it's going to be in a year or two, right? I mean, you must be a little bit paranoid about that.
This is why what I was talking about before is constant need for new, more efficient applications, right? So I don't think it's about one medium. Right, so that's kind of what I'm saying is there's not one application that will be the dominant application that people are using over a period of time, but the general trend of people sharing more information, people wanting access to more information, I mean, we're now, the current generation of people is one that demands more transparency, ability to share information and access to information than has ever been true historically. And I think that's going to continue, and that's just because of the internet at large. And I think any individual application, probably will kind of grow and fade over time. So that's why our focus is on just continuing to build these types of applications and build a platform that makes it so that people can continually share more information. And that's why the mission of the company isn't to make it so people can message each other as best as possible. It's to make the world more open. Right? So I think it's making it so that we'll just continue building whatever the applications are of the day that make sense, and the platforms that people can continue to build those. And I think that's how you make it so that you can continue adding value for people over long periods of time.
I'm getting hand signals from the back that we're done. We're done. I mean, in the U.S., no problem. In Switzerland, we're done. Yeah, when they say we're done. I want to thank everyone. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.